Howdy ESSM 406. In this lecture, I'm going to briefly introduce an overview of what you're going to be studying in Unit 3. Unit 3 is basically about policy solutions. So in Unit 2, we discussed a number of causes of environmental policy problems, and now in Unit 3, we're going to talk about a whole bunch of different kinds of solutions. And there's so many of these different kinds of solutions that I actually broke the unit up into two pieces. So there's actually Unit 3.1 and Unit 3.2, and they're kind of like two totally separate units. In Unit 3.1, we're going to talk about what most people would consider the fairly traditional kinds of tools for solving environmental problems. And in Unit 3.2, we're going to talk about some more unusual forms of environmental policy problems, policy solutions. All of these are very widely employed in our field. So it's not that one is better or one is newer. They're all very widely employed, but the first ones we're going to look at, which are what's often called command and control regulation and property and markets, are the ones that are kind of most widely talked about. And in the second part of the unit, we're going to talk about, in Unit 3.2, we're going to talk about things like community-based solutions and collaborative governance, and some alternative dispute resolution techniques that are also very widely used. They're equally important, but just for the purpose of breaking up the unit into some pieces so we didn't have too much in one unit, I split them in two. So let's look a little bit closer at the overview of Unit 3.1. You're going to be doing a whole bunch of readings in this unit, and the readings are basically going to be about two generic kinds of policy solutions. The first is what we call command and control often, and the second is what I'm calling property and markets. This can often be interpreted as sort of government versus markets, and that's a very popular way to understand public policy. It's often discussed in the public sphere, and it really dates back to kind of some assumptions that people made about public policy in the time of the Cold War, when it was assumed that you would either be a capitalist or a communist, and there was a very strong dichotomy. Actually, that dichotomy is a little overplayed. As we understand it, property and markets are very tied up with government regulation, and what we often call command and control regulation are very widely used in capitalist economies and very common in capitalist economies, even though they're kind of somehow associated with the state more than property or markets. That's a little bit misleading. So don't let these ideological labels drive everything that you understand. Try to look at these things a little bit more critically. And the core idea of this division, we're going to be reading a classic essay by Garrett Hardin called The Tragedy of the Commons. And in it, he uses this metaphor of a commons that's being overgrazed. And you've already read about common pool resources, which is what he's talking about. And he says that there's a tendency for these kinds of resources to be overused. And he proposes two kinds of solutions. One is the government should step in and tell people how to use the resource. That's basically what we mean by command and control regulation. And the other one is also the government should step in and assign property rights over this resource to individuals. And he basically says these are the two kinds of solutions that we could use. Now in Unit 3.2, we're going to learn that Hardin's kind of wrong. But for now, in Unit 3.1, we can say, well, these are two kinds of solutions we can use to deal with overuse problems, to deal with environmental degradation kinds of problems. And in Unit 3.1, we're also going to talk a little bit about cost-benefit analysis, which is a tool for analyzing the relative costs and benefits of different policies. Now, in my next lectures, I'm going to go into more detail on the different kinds of environmental policy instruments. I'm giving you a very good new reading on this topic by Salzman, and then I'm going to talk in a little bit more detail about command and control regulation and about property and markets. So watch for new lectures forthcoming.